Welcome into episode 79 of the Level Flight podcast. My name is Connor. I've got Elliott here with me today. We're one episode away from the PLD episode, episode 80. Big milestone. But Elliott, how you doing?
Good. I'm good. I mean, I'm doing better than the results showed yesterday from the Jets, but a little swamped with homework. So I guess, a little bit of a slow start, if you want to call it that. We're trying to finish strong, so
Trying to finish strong. Yeah, absolutely. And the Jets are trying to finish strong, but they're failing as of right now. If you were with us on Sunday for LFP Live, we did talk about the Islanders game at length. One of the worst efforts of the season for Winnipeg. That game wasn't even close. But since then, they played another game Sunday morning against the Washington Capitals, and they lost yet again. Their third straight. They lost 3-0. Alexander Ovechkin scored twice because, of course, against the Jets Thrashers organization, he just had to score because it's Alexander Ovechkin. Of course.
It's Alexander Ovechkin. If he hasn't scored against your franchise, then you don't exist. So it doesn't really count.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But the main takeaway and what I saw on Twitter, and it's their third straight loss, and they haven't played great for months. And we'll get into that later on in the episode. Just kind of a temperature check on where the Jets are at. But for me, this game was more okay. If they had lost this game in the middle of December when they were rolling, it would just be like okay, whatever, on to the next one. But because it was coming off of the heels of those Devils and Islanders games, it looks a heck of a lot worse. This game was way different, in my opinion, from those two games. Like the first two periods, the Jets were all over the Capitals. Charlie Lindgren had a masterclass in net. And that's going to happen sometimes. Like you're just going to lose games. Connor Hellebuyck will win games like that sometimes for the Jets. And you just kind of shrug your shoulders. But when it's your third straight loss, and you look at the past couple months and what their record is like since the All-Star break kind of thing, it's you need points like that, right? What did you see from the game? Is your thought process kind of the same, like kind of just one bad period, third period, couple unlucky bounces, or what did you see?
Well, I think, and I know some people will like when I say this, this was like an ode to the Jets of old. They play really good for 2 periods, and then look what happens. They don't convert on their chances, and it bites them, right? So you kind of, as much as I don't want to say you take this game with a grain of salt, you also have to look at the positives. And I know there's lots of people going, well, it's game 70, whatever. You shouldn't really be looking at the positives. Well, if the Jets' whole mantra is, you know what, we're essentially clinching the playoffs, we're already looking towards like first round in late April, then you just need to be looking at the positives. You need to see the things that you want to see from a playoff team, right? And I think for the most part, the Jets showed that in the first 2 periods. They were all over Washington. They played well. It was just they didn't score when they got their chances, and it bit them, right? Like even if they do score on 2 or 3 chances, either they lose 3-2 or it's a tie game and they go to overtime, right? So either way, it's a not so great game for the Jets if you just look at the scoreline. But I mean, if you look at the game as a whole, you win 2 periods theoretically. You bounce back to an extent from the Islanders game, and then you just can't get over the line. I think these guys I think there's also something else that nobody's really talking about here is we started off this month, and I believe it was you, Connor, you prefaced, this is their busiest month of the season, and it's coming in the second last month of the year. Like, this team has gone through the flu bug. They've gone through the injury bug at times. And I'm sure now they're just dealing with fatigue. And it's March. Like, this is the time of year where it should be kind of lightening up on the schedule, or you would hope it would for your players' sake, especially for a team going to the playoffs. But they might just be running out of gas at the moment. Like, maybe they just need to find a gas station and refuel right now. Like, this plane is coming down hard. Like, if we're going to take the Jets references here, this plane has run out of fuel and there's nowhere to emergency land right now. And the Jets essentially need to make their own emergency landing just to salvage this end of the season. Because God forbid they go into the playoffs with a losing record. We already know how the internet and the social media and TV space is going to look like around the Jets. It's going to be the whole situation. Oh, well, they were frauds all year. We were fooled for 70-something games, right? Like,
yeah.
and it's not going to help their confidence. I'm sure the fatigue is a factor right now, and these guys are professionals, and you know what? They're on their phones. I'm sure that they're
well, you know, it's funny because the whole frauds thing, and we'll get into that because honestly, at this point, it's a legit question. Like it has some merit now, but this game in particular, before we move into that, I do want to save that for after the break. This game, I think the first 2 periods were a perfect example. You said it. They played their structure. They bounced back, but the score was 0-0. And ultimately, it's a results-based business, and they lost the game, and that's all people are going to look at. But to me, I think the first 2 periods was enough of like, okay, there's a response there from the two terrible games they had over the weekend. Like they proved that they could come out, they could have some jump from the start. Even in the second period, it was all in Washington's end, and I don't know how they didn't have a lead going into the third. It was like Lindgren was unbelievable. And then the third period, yeah, they didn't play their best. A few defensive breakdowns, one incredibly lucky goal for Alexander Ovechkin, and the game that's how you lose the game, and that's just is what it is at this point. But I think I talked about it on LFP Live, the emotional high of the Rangers win coming like crashing down off of that to the Devils game. And then the Islanders game, the first 2 periods of that were also incredibly lackluster. And then the third period, they bounced back in the Islanders game, but the Islanders clearly just gave up. And then you follow that up with a game where you don't win, but again, if this game was in the middle of December, people would shrug their shoulders and go, whatever. You play like that 9 times out of 10, you're going to win, right? Like that's what people would say. It's just the time of the year, pressure's high. And this is going to lead us well into our next segment because their rest of season schedule is tough. Yeah. Like you want to talk, like a lot of the talk over the weekend was, the Islanders were desperate and the Capitals were desperate because they're right on the playoff line. Okay. Scott O'Neill even mentioned after the Washington game, like, hey, we should be a desperate team as well, because we have seeding to fight for, and we could be the 1 seed in the Central and play a wildcard team, and we have things to fight for. So we should have that desperation, and they simply didn't. But down the stretch here, they're going to be playing a lot of playoff opponents, a lot of desperate teams, and it can go one of two ways, because they can either rise to the occasion like the way they did against the Rangers, which was less than a week ago. Like that game feels so ancient. But it was less than a week. Like it was 6 days ago at the time.
It was 3 games ago.
Yeah. Like it feels so, it feels like that game was played in December. Like, honestly, it does. It feels like that was so long ago. But
yeah,
like there's going to be a lot of opportunities starting with tonight when you're hearing this podcast against the Edmonton Oilers at home. This is an opportunity for the Jets to really bounce back, beat a playoff team, look good while doing so. And put a lot of questions behind them, and then follow it up consistently, because the Rangers game, we saw how they followed it up. You have a big, high emotional win against a team like Edmonton or a team like Vegas on Thursday night. Follow it up and do it again the next game, because that's what you need in the playoffs. You got to follow up these big wins. Last word before we take a break.
Last thing, you mentioned Scott O'Neill. I think that's another thing that we should add. Like, I'm not trying to add excuses to this team, but they're also human beings at the same point. Scott O'Neill is coaching the team, and it was out of nowhere, right? You have to remember that these are human beings. These are guys that have bonded with their head coach, who just up and has to go for, yes, a minor procedure, but we also don't know the full story of what happened. We don't know if something happened to Rick overnight. The guys got woken up in the middle of the night and something happened. And then now, obviously, maybe they're not telling the media because they don't want to get out. And maybe something happened, right? So that
we should learn. Yes, totally. And just to add some context there, we should learn by the time you're listening to this podcast Tuesday morning, there's a Jets morning skate. And either Scott O'Neill will address the media and give an update, because they said that Bonus was going to join the team. So yeah, on the road trip. Right. So I would expect Bonus to be back with the team starting today when you're hearing this on Tuesday. But if not, it'll be O'Neill, and he'll address the media and say like, hey, yeah, Bonus needs a few more days or whatever. But stay glued to Twitter and all your news sources for that. But yes.
You look at, I know it's March Madness right now, but you look at last year, KU lost in the second round to Arkansas because Bill Self had to go have a procedure himself right before the tournament. Like, they were a complete mess. Even this year, Kevin McCullough Jr. had been battling injury all season. Bill Self in their game against Cincinnati where they lost by 20. Oh, if this was an NCAA tournament game, he'd be playing. And then the day before the game in Salt Lake, he made this huge cryptic announcement saying that Kevin wasn't going to play, and he kind of tried hard. Like, he really weirded it very weirdly. And then he had to go on Twitter himself, Bill Self did, and address the rumors, right? And, like, there was a whole mess of a situation. So things like this happen. Guys get distracted, and they're human beings, and it's late in the year. They're fatigued. Their minds are probably all over the place. So I just wanted to mention that because it's another valid reason for this team that could be off the rails. Yes, they didn't play well, but it could be that they've got so much other stuff going on in their heads as human beings that they can't go perform.
And again, it's results based. So I'd argue they did come out and perform on Sunday, but it just didn't go their way, right? But the first two games definitely, like, in my opinion, inexcusable. Brendan Dillon called it embarrassing, unacceptable, and it was. But it was good to see the team bounce back off of that on Sunday. When we come back after the break, we're going to do a bit of a temperature check on the Jets because we recorded an episode last Wednesday, the very next day after that huge win over the New York Rangers. And me especially, there were a lot of things said because, again, the team was up and down till that point, and then we hyped up that game. It was their third straight win at the time. It was such a huge game against literally a top 5 team, maybe President's Trophy winning team in the NHL. And they went in and won. Like, that was such an emotional high that when we recorded the next day, there was a lot. So off of the 3-game losing streak, we're going to reset, take kind of a temperature check on where we're at with the fraud squad. And we'll be back. We'll be back after this word from DraftKings. So stick around.
We know hockey games move fast, but with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you can score faster than anything happening on the ice. This week, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app with code THPN. New customers bet $5 on the NHL and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2024, all rights reserved.
And welcome back into episode 79 of the Level Flight podcast. My name is Connor. I've got Elliott here with me. Thank you, everyone, and especially to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Let's get into this sort of temperature check, Elliott. There's obviously the comment made about how this team was frauds, an unnamed player in the West making that statement, or whatever the official statement was at the time. So where are you at with the Jets? They had the Rangers win. They had the 3 straight losses. I'll say this first. I said after the Rangers game that there wasn't a team in the West where I wouldn't lean towards taking the Jets when they played them in the first round. After these 3 games, that's definitely changed for me. We can roll through which teams kind of looking ahead at matchups would be most problematic for the Jets. But where are you at? Are they frauds? Are they legit? Should Jets fans be panicking? Where are you at with the Jets nowadays with 11 games heading into the playoffs?
So realistically, like, my view was still the same as it was before. Like, I was still kind of not very optimistic about where they were at. They've been kind of up and down. I think the most interesting thing to me as of late, obviously this dates back quite a while, but Scott Billick tweeted out based on if you take the goal differential or the goals for and goals against from that 34 game stretch that they had, from that end point up until now, their goal differential, I believe, or their goals for is the exact same as their goals against. So this team has been playing since that huge, like, just absolute tear they went on in December. They've been essentially playing 500 hockey. So
they're 14, 12, and 1 since their 34 game 3 goals or less streak was broken. Since then, they're 14, 12, and 1. So like mediocre, 500 hockey, like you said.
Yeah. So realistically, to me, my view hasn't really changed much, because what I said the episode that we talked about that on was they've gotten a couple wins against good teams, but they need to keep it up for me to change my thought process. So, and they've been like this. They have been all over the place. So for me, like, as much as I don't want to get too high on the highs, I also don't want to get too low on the lows either. Like, I don't want to be like, there are people online right now who are just losing their minds. Connor made a mention to the fraud squad. There was a comment on a YouTube video that Connor showed me today, or showed both Brian and I in our group chat, about calling the Jets the fraud squad. I don't think that we're at that point yet. Like, if they end the season after that 34 game win streak, like 5 or 6 games under 500, okay, then fine. Like, let's roll with that now. But they're 14, 12, and 1, and they still have 11 games left. Like, they could go 7, 3, and 1 in their next stretch, and they're good. So I think realistically, I still think I'm at the same place where I don't really want to play Colorado. Not fan of playing Dallas either, but like anybody else, I'm kind of okay with. Maybe the Oilers scare me a little bit, but like, I'm still in the same spot.
Yeah. Just to that point, I think the Oilers are actually like the most unlikely team that the Jets could play, because the Oilers are locked into that second seed in the Pacific, and the Jets aren't in the Pacific. So I think that they're in the clear on that. The Oilers obviously are playing the Jets tonight, but I'm kind of like, okay, I've definitely cooled down from Wednesday. I'll say that right off the top. Like, I think Wednesday, or the Rangers game on the Tuesday, and then when we recorded the day after on the Wednesday, again, the players, it's an emotional high. For people that watch the team, it's an emotional high. Like, that was such a huge game, right? And the question was, can the Jets beat a good team? And then they went in and did it. So in my mind, it was like, all right, this team's kind of like back. They just beat a good team. That was the one concern. Now I think that's that problem, or that like the concerns list is grown exponentially over these past 3 games. Like, the penalty kill in the Devils game was a real concern. The power play without Gabriel Velarde is a real concern. And I just think the line configuration as well. Like, we can get more into what the Jets do, like, in our opinion, what we think they should be doing going forward to get back on track. But as of right now, again, they're the 3 seed in the Central. That's kind of where I see them right now. Dallas and Colorado are better. If the Jets had to play a Nashville in round 1, I'd be terrified, because Nashville hasn't lost since February. Mid-February, that is, 15th. Vegas, again, has issues, but I'd still be terrified if I was a Jets fan, given how they've played over these last, 25 games, 14, 12, and 1. Not a math major, so don't quote me on it. But honestly, it's really concerning that they're a 500 team in that stretch, when you take into account the fact that they've acquired Monahan and acquired Toffoli, and now is like a low point since that stretch right now. It's really interesting. And they added Monahan. They had the huge win against the Canucks on Hockey Night in Canada, which another game, 4-2 win on the road against one of the best teams in the league, that kind of proved their legitimacy. And then kind of tailed off a bit. Monahan hasn't scored in a long time for the Jets. Toffoli had those big games against Anaheim and Columbus, but didn't really do much in the three game losing streak. It's just kind of, I'm shrugging my shoulders, and I'm waiting for this team to either prove to themselves and to the fans that this is just a bump in the road, and they actually are a good team, and they have that opportunity with this upcoming homestand,
or just
Or are they just going to be an inconsistent bunch going into the playoffs? And then once again, we're going to be asking, can they flip the switch going into the first round? Like I think we've asked that. The Jets have made the playoffs 6 of the last 7 years, assuming they make it this year. I think we've asked that almost every single year, except for 2017-18, where they just crushed it, right? And it's going to happen again, because unless they really turn it on here, that's going to be a question, and they're going to play a good team. And like, I can see it already. They're going to play a Colorado, or they're going to play a Dallas, and it's going to be like, okay, we don't feel great, but if the Jets can like find lightning in a bottle, they could easily win that series.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be tough series, but the Jets match up. Like, it's not, I'm not saying they're going to sweep them, but like, Jets winning a series against Dallas or Colorado in 6 or 7 is absolutely plausible if they can actually, quote, flip the switch. But can they do that over these last final 11 games? Can they do that for an extended period of time in the playoffs, especially? That is the one question I'm looking for, and it starts with this 5-game homestand. Edmonton, Vegas, Ottawa, one of the worst teams in the NHL, got to win that one. LA, Calgary. So that's 4 teams that are in the West, either in a playoff spot in Edmonton, Vegas, LA, or right on the bubble, Calgary. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they're kind of there. You got to win these games, like not all 5, but whatever.
Well,
you got to prove that the process can remain throughout that. What are you looking for on the 5-game homestand against 4 good Western Conference opponents?
Like, here is how I'm gonna take it. If they go, obviously they're not going to go 5-0. Like, if they go 5-0, then I think everything should be put to everything should be put to bed. Take a bat to all of the fraud callers out there, like, whatever. Best case scenario is they go 4-1 and they lose to either Edmonton or Vegas, right? And they win the other 4 games. I would even actually be okay with them going 3-2 and looking competitive and all. Like, here's my thing. If they beat Edmonton, Vegas, and then like lose to Ottawa, well, then I'm not going to get that upset, because it's it all depends on how everything shakes out. Because if they only go 2-3, then I'm saying, okay, this 5-game homestand was unsuccessful, like mission failed. If they go 3-2 and they beat like 2 of the bad, like obviously if they beat Calgary, Ottawa, and then somebody else, then that's kind of where I'm at. But other than that, like this needs to be a successful road trip.
Homestand.
Sorry, homestand. Yes. Why am I saying road trip?
Well, they just came off the night road trip. So
we were just talking about that for the last month.
Exactly. And another thing for me is they need to solve some of their issues here. And I want to get your thoughts on this, because they've been trying. I saw this on Twitter, and I'm not sure who it was that brought it up, but I saw this, and they were saying that the Jets in that 14-12-1 stretch have had the same issues, and they're trying to solve it with like the same fixes. And that is, in terms of lines, same D pairings, which fine, you want to roll with the same D pairings, I'm all ears. Forward lines, Connor and Scheifele need to be split up, like for an extended period of time, because since they've got back together, they've lost their minutes, like plain and simple. Like, they had a great game against the Rangers, sure, but they're losing their minutes, and that can't happen. The third line, the Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton line, has been fantastic all year long. You want to stick with that line? Sure. But like, they switched it up last game. Appleton was on the top line. Like, I don't know. Ehlers, I think, needs to be with Scheifele. I'd like to see Ehlers, Scheifele, Toffoli as the top line. I think that could really do some damage and overcome some of these scoring issues that they've had. But I think the biggest thing for me is Connor and Scheifele need to be split up over this 5-game homestand, because, again, you've had the same problems, and the fix to it hasn't changed. They're still trying to roll with Connor and Scheifele. They're still trying to roll with that third line and the same D pairings. And to me, that's just not going to cut it, because we've seen the sample size, and the sample size is big enough that that's not going to work. What are you looking for? Or I'll phrase it this way. What should the Jets be doing, in your opinion, over this 5-game homestand to try and fix some of the issues that they've had over these last couple of games?
Like I've said, it's just, I've said in previous shows, like, just play your style of game. Elliott Friedman talked about it on the 32 Thoughts podcast today, or as of Monday. Like, just play your style of game. That's all it takes. Like, you don't need to do anything crazy. Just play your slow style, play your structure as best you can, and go from there. That's really all I'm looking for.
Yeah. And one last thing before we end off episode 79. Thank you to everyone for checking it out. Elliott Freeman, you brought it up. He also mentioned he wonders if, when the Jets were dominant, Cole Perfetti was in the top 6. And now Cole Perfetti hasn't been great. He was in the press box, but he's gotten back in the last couple games. He scored against the Islanders. I thought he looked pretty good against the Capitals as well. What are you opposed? Because again, I'm not
opposed to him going back in the top 6. I just don't think it happens at this point in the year. They're not going to go back to it.
I don't think it happens, but I'd like to see it happen because
for sure.
Mesnikov and Iafallo have been in the top 6, and that hasn't really helped. To any, like, you can run Ehlers, Scheifele, and Toffoli as your top line, and then Connor, Monahan, Perfetti as your second line. Try and get him going, because if he can step in and be a contributor in that top 6, that kind of changes everything. And you can have Ehlers and Scheifele together. We know they win their minutes. But if they go into the Edmonton game with like Connor, Scheifele, Nemesnikov, Ehlers, Monahan, like they try the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just going to be like, throw your hands up and be like, all right, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Because this lineup or these lines, they're not gelling. They're not working. And you've gotten slaughtered the last 3 games.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Do you have anything else on what you're looking for?
No, that's it. Just play your style. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Play Winnipeg Jets hockey, as Rick Bonus says all the time. All right, let's get on out of here. The next episode is going to be episode 80. Super excited for that one. I'll stop calling it the PLD episode. That was my last time calling it that, I swear. But all 3 of us will make sure that we'll be on there because, again, another milestone. Thank you to everyone who listens, who joined us on Sunday for our LFP Live. We can't wait to do it again this Sunday. It's going to be an absolute blast. But in the meantime, enjoy the games. We're going to be back with an episode Thursday, breaking down the Oilers game and previewing the Vegas game. And hopefully we'll have some new lines to talk about. So we'll see. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. This has been episode 79 of the LFP. We will see you Thursday. Have a great week, everyone.
Peace.